A meeting of rivals at the freshly concluded 20th Shanghai Cooperation Organisation Summit. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping have just met online for the first time since tensions broke out in Ladakh. Now also present, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan. Islamabad and Delhi are locked in a border dispute over Kashmir. While the meeting did not allow for one-on-one exchanges, Prime Minister Modi did have a warning for all member states. He called on all nations to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. For the latest, we are joined by Neha Punya in New Delhi. So Neha, what are the bloc's priorities for the coming year?
Well, the main aim of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is to put together a united front to come up with joint solutions to problems that these neighbors and countries in Eurasia face, and also to deal with these challenges in the spirit of being a good neighbor, which is why we saw these countries come together and discuss the most pressing problem that the entire world is facing, which is that of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the discussions centered around the problems that member nations face, particularly to do with vaccine development and distribution. You had India volunteering to help every member nation, saying that given India's massive capacity to produce vaccines, it will step up and help once a vaccine is ready for distribution the world over. Russia similarly saying that there should be no politicization of vaccines, particularly on the distribution front. Vladimir Putin saying that whenever a vaccine is ready, it should be for all mankind and should not be monopolized by nations as well, and similar comments coming from President Xi Jinping as well. So while there was conversation on things like terrorism and reforms that the United Nations need, dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic was a huge concern, particularly given that many parts of Russia and India are dealing with now what is being called a second wave of infections.
Neha, Prime Minister Modi's speech also alluded to tensions with China. What more can you tell us about that?
This was a very important moment, Steve, given that this is the first time that Prime Minister Modi came face-to-face with President Xi Jinping, albeit virtually. This is the first time that happened since that standoff started in May. And in the last 6 months, we've seen several rounds of diplomatic and military-level talks, but there's been absolutely no disengagement on the ground. Both sides continue to face off in what is being described as a very tense situation still, which is why Prime Minister Modi's message was not a direct one, but an indirect one. And the overarching theme of his message was that India is a responsible neighbor, one that is willing to play by the rules. He said it's important that all member nations respect the territorial integrity of other member nations. He was speaking particularly in context to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, an infrastructure project that cuts through what India calls Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It's a project that India has protested against in the past as well. And many believe this was a warning not just to Beijing, but also to Islamabad. And also the reference to upholding territorial integrity, many experts believe, was a reference to what's happening in Ladakh still, given that you've had the foreign ministers of both nations meet a few months ago, promised to disengage, but nothing really happening on the ground. So in that sense, India making its position felt very clearly at this forum.
Okay, many thanks for that. Neha Punya speaking to us from New Delhi.